Hey guys, welcome to this next video, which we're just going to talk about division by surds and radicals and what they are. This is going to be a pretty short video today because there's going to be not a lot of new content to cover because you guys should be familiar with at least square roots and maybe even cube roots by now and what they do. But we're going to talk about them in terms of real numbers. There is going to be a concept that we're going to talk about today, which is known as multiplying by the conjugate, which you may not have heard before. And it's a really quite an important mathematical concept to get across. And it makes our lives quite easier, especially when we're dealing with surds and radicals later on down the track in our mathematical courses. Doesn't matter if it's this year or even next year. So let's get started. So you may have seen this sign before here and just think, yep, that's a square root. Well, the proper mathematical term for it is actually called a radical. And we call it the radical sign. So if I was to write that, then that's actually the radical of 3, but we just call it the square root of 3. A surd is obviously going to be what you might have heard them referred to before, and that's just a real irrational radical. And what these are, if I was to put into a calculator the square root of 2 and see what that equals, well, it's not going to be a number that is rational. It doesn't terminate, it just goes on and on forever, and there is no repeating to it. So it's not a recurring decimal. So let's just give that a quick try. So if I go into my calculator here, and I type in 2 square root, it's 1.41, etc., etc. There is no pattern there to it to make it a recurring or terminating decimal. It's one of those numbers that just goes on forever, hence why we call it irrational. Alright, so let's have a look at an example of what we're going to be doing. So what we might have here is, let's go 1 divided by 5 plus the square root of 2. Now, what we want to do is write this in the form of a plus b root 2, where a and b are just going to be real numbers. How could we do this to make it so it's just one number? Well, with anything like this where we've got a square root on our denominator, it makes it really hard to do the maths behind it. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this by what we call the radical conjugate, or the conjugate. And that is, in this case, 5 minus the square root of 2 divided by 5 minus the square root of 2. Now, I don't have to tell you that by multiplying it by this, essentially what we're doing is multiplying it by 1. Because 5 divided by 5 is just 1, and root 2 divided by root 2 is just 1 as well. The thing that's changed here is the sign. We've gone from a plus there to a minus here. And whenever we multiply by the conjugate, we change the sign. So what's this going to will look like when we do it? So we're going to have 5 minus square root of 2 on top. Underneath, got 5 times 5, which is give us 25. Now, if we think about it, we've got square root of 2 times 5, which is just 5 root 2, but we've also got take 5 root 2. So the square root sign, or the radical down the bottom in our denominator, is actually going to get cancelled out. But let's expand it so you can see exactly what's happening. So we're going to have plus 5 root 2, take 5 root 2. And now we've got square root of 2 multiplied by minus square root of 2, well, that's just going to be minus 2. Let's expand that out a bit. And you can see that this part here and this part here cancel each other out. And suddenly we're left with no radicals on our denominator. So what this is going to be is going to be 5 minus root 2 divided by 23. Now, we still haven't written in that a plus b root 2 form yet. We've just got a little bit more to do. It's going to be 5 over 23 minus the square root of 2 over 23. And all we could do is 1 over 23 times root 2 if we wanted to, which should be what b is equal to. And that's really the concept that we're going to be looking at in this section. So as I mentioned, it's going to be a fairly short video. That's really all that we're going to go through. It's just multiplying by the conjugate. And remember, if it's a positive, change the conjugate sign to be a negative. If it's a negative, change it to be a positive. So just make sure that the signs are different. That way, and the reason for that is so we can get this cancellation that happens here. So if you've got any comments, just let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.